Welcome back, boils and ghouls.
It is the My Thing, Your Thing Spooktacular.
Yeah, the Halloween, October, you just gonna shit your pants series that we're doing here.
Where we're sharing things that spook us.
Yeah, like
they
horror.
Give us the heebies and the jeebies.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Donovan.
I'm Hannah.
And today this is my thing.
Yeah.
This is a thing that I don't want to say I've been obsessed with, but this is something that I was obsessed with at a time and have sort of followed closely for 16 years.
Cheese and Pete's.
Yeah. The thing that it is sort of hard to describe exactly. Because it's not one genre, it's sort of like an overlapping amalgamation of like 4 or 5 different genres of horror. What I am, of course, referring to is analog horror.
Ooh.
Or digital horror. Yeah. Or ARGs and found footage and unfiction and all of that stuff.
It all kind of lumps together a little bit.
Yeah. I'm actually gonna totally derail the episode and all of the pacing, and I'm gonna just kind of define those terms real fast because I think it's kind of important to understand.
Yeah, people need the vocabulary so they know what we're talking about.
The easiest one to understand and the one that probably everybody is familiar with.
Hi, it's me. I'm People.
Is found footage.
Yeah.
Like, everybody knows what found footage is. Basically, if you don't somehow know what found footage is essentially a genre of filmmaking where, in the fiction, you did not film this. This was filmed by somebody else, and you're sort of assembling it for an audience.
Yes. There is a person behind the camera who is part of the story because they are filming it and sometimes giving commentary on it.
Yeah. Found footage goes back to the 60s. People were doing found footage for a long time, but found footage horror was a more modern invention. And probably the movie that most popularized it was The Blair Witch Project.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to be talking about the Blair Witch Project a little bit this episode because it's kind of related to almost all of these.
I was thinking the first Cloverfield movie because that was sort of the first big budget one, but you're right, Blair Witch, yeah.
We will be talking about Cloverfield as well.
Of course.
The second one, and probably the hardest to define, is ARG, or alternate reality game.
Yeah.
Basically, an alternate reality game is a game that's like a mixed media in real time sort of thing. An internet, specifically an internet ARG. So a lot of times these are used as a viral marketing for some product or thing.
Like Cloverfield.
I
remember the marketing for Cloverfield had a whole thing. My sister was, I think, into it, or somebody I knew was into it. I didn't really do it.
Yeah.
But part of the ads was there would be ads, fake ads for a fake drink, and then there'd be a website, and you go to the website and it can take you somewhere else, and it'll give you all this little additional information.
Exactly. There was one called I Love Bees that advertised Halo 2. When that game came out, I was very into it. They did one for the movie AI.
Yeah.
Way back in the early 2000s. Essentially, if you're watching a series or you're interested in a series and there's things in it that have clues, and then you can use those clues to go on a website or enter a code, and then you get other videos and you get other parts of the narrative out of that, so you're sort of interacting with the story. That's kind of an ARG.
Yeah. They've been used for viral marketing campaigns a lot, but that's not the only context that it's used in. There are people who run ARGs just because it's fun, because they like putting breadcrumbs around and seeing who's going to follow it.
There's supposedly one, I've watched a little bit of it, where you can actually order something to your house, and it's got a bunch of the clues, and then you use that to sort of do a bunch of ARG stuff. The cicada thing was an ARG for a while. People were really into that. Just a lot of this kind of stuff. This is, that's an ARG. It's very complicated. There's a lot of different definitions and things that are involved in it, but it's important to this, and we'll get to it. The third definition I want to give, this is probably the simplest, but it's the most like recent that I've seen being used, is unfiction.
Yes.
And unfiction is essentially a fictional story that is being presented as though it really happened. So
a lot of the stuff on r/no sleep.
Exactly. The Blair Witch Project is arguably like the definitive like first unfiction major like horror, because it was not presented as this is a movie. It was presented as this actually happened.
This is the thing that happened.
Yeah.
Quick fun little story about Blair Witch that ties in. There was a post on Tumblr a while ago where someone was like, I'm from the town that they filmed the Blair Witch in, and when they were doing it, they made an announcement like, hey, these people are making a movie. Don't bother them. Leave them alone. They're trying to make a movie. And the entire high school class was like, all right. And they all got up and they all went out and like, made a bunch of like nonsense. Like they
Perfect.
put sticks everywhere and like shook tents and like did extra stuff to just kind of annoy people. And there's like also another layer, because this is just a random person on Tumblr who could be making something up. I don't know if that's a real thing or if that is an unfiction.
You don't know, and that's the fun of this whole thing.
Oh, it's so good.
It really, really is. This whole like genre of horror. Personally, I think I've mentioned this to you before, but I will say this on the podcast. I don't get scared by horror movies. I just don't. I love them. I think they're interesting. Like, I have a good time with them because I like the idea of, like, things that are scary, and I love to have those kinds of, themes and things in my head. But, like, when I watch a horror movie, it does not scare me because I know it's a horror movie.
Sure.
I know it's fake. I know that, Hugh Grant's not actually going to kill anybody in Heretic or whatever. He's just acting in the movie. Like, I know that.
Yeah.
A lot of this unfiction internet stuff, especially early on when it was just being like released onto YouTube with like no preamble and no like genre behind it, like it was like, is this real? Like, you literally didn't know.
Yeah.
And that was part of why it was so engrossing. And personally, that's why I got really into it. It's so much easier for me to suspend my disbelief when it's being presented that way.
Yeah.
And then the last one, the main one, analog horror. Again, kind of a tricky definition because it's sort of both a genre and it's also sort of just like an aesthetic that like the genre sort of lives within. It's become sort of a catch-all term. But generally speaking, analog horror is heavily influenced by found footage, and it typically uses the like look and limitations of film, VHS, and other like 20th century media technology. Digital horror is very similar, but focuses more on like early internet or like video games, that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of overlap. So if you're watching like a horror movie and like VHS distortion and like tape artifacts and things like that, film grain, that kind of makes it analog horror. So you're sort of using that aesthetic to sort of create this like retro feel.
Yeah.
The phrase I've used before is uncanny nostalgia.
Yeah.
It presents your sort of like past, the history that you come from, and it's comforting, but it's off. It's not quite how you remember it, and that's, I think, the basis of the horror.
Yeah.
That kind of leads me to my next point, which is fascinating to me, is because if you're listening to this, dear listener, and you're over the age of 35, you might be like, I've never heard of any of this before, except maybe Blair Witch because I was in high school or whatever, but like none of this means anything to me. But if you're under 35, you're probably listening to this and going, yeah, analog horror, it's old news. Everyone's done it. It's just like a weird like thing because the people that analog horror is being made for are not people who lived through the era that it is evoking.
Yeah, there's a lot of nostalgia for times that people did not live through. I remember in the 90s when we were all nostalgic for the 60s and 70s.
Yes.
And my dad being like, no, that's just the clothes that I wore. What are you talking about?
I totally agree. And I think it's fascinating that it has hit with the Gen Z, Gen Alpha kind of group, although it started with people about our age. It started with sort of the younger side of millennials.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, the history of the genre. It started in the late 2000s, really, as the ability to kind of make and release like video became super easy. Like you could just get a digital camera or get a camera and just upload that shit to YouTube. Like that was really easy to make videos.
Yes.
And at the same time, there was a huge increase in popularity for the found footage genre. As you mentioned, Cloverfield, I remember the Poughkeepsie tapes. Like,
oh yeah,
they were like, that was a huge one at the time, in like 2007, 2008. Like, people were really into the sort of spooky found footage, like, genre.
When did that the anthology VHS come out?
The first one came out in 2012, so
okay.
A little bit later, but still riding
that wave.
Yeah, absolutely. This also kind of coincided with the popularity of creepypasta.
Yes.
For those of you who are over 35 and once again being like, what the hell is creepypasta? Creepypasta is a play on the term copypasta, which was a thing where like you would copy and paste some kind of internet like screed.
You've probably heard of copypasta. You just probably might not know that that's what it was called. And like, you know, it happened a lot on like message boards and forums and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You know, listen up, little shit. I'm a Marine with 35 confirmed kills, or like that's one. Or if you were on Tumblr, oh god, I don't remember how it starts, but it is something like that. Like listen up, like Thunder Cunt or something like that. I don't remember the copypasta itself, but I remember it was about a gif of a bird walking into a chocolate fountain that was CGI that someone took very seriously.
Sure. You know, that was kind of like the early internet version of like the spooky urban legends that earlier generations grew up with.
It wasn't necessarily you talking about how, like, you know, you heard that your cousin's sister's friend got a spider that laid an egg in her face and then hatched. It was, oh, don't go to this specific website because like a ghost will pop out and eat you.
Yeah, you know, like the Bloody Mary is like, you know, Cardor Hook Hand.
God, Cardor Hook Hand.
The fact of me calling it Cardor Hook Hand is like meme.
If you know, you know.
Yeah.
Like,
that stuff all existed in like the pre-internet days, and then when the internet kind of started, there were new ones.
Then Who Was Phone?
Yeah, but Who Was Phone? A classic. Day of All the Blood, so much fun. The first one is typically credited as Ted the Caver. That was
I've not heard this one.
You've not heard of Ted the Caver?
I've not heard, unless I have, and I just don't know that it's called Ted the Caver.
Ooh, I kind of hate Ted the Caver because one of the things that does make me scared is claustrophobia and the thought of being stuck in a cave. So Ted the Caver is very scary to me.
Oh, Donovan, me too. We are two of the same people.
Yeah, I love you too. It was published on an Angel Fire website in 2001.
Angel Fire!
This is what I'm talking about.
Oh
yeah.
my gosh.
That was kind of considered to be like the first creepypasta, although I kind of argue that the chainmail from the 90s where it was like, send this to 10 friends or the girl from the ring's gonna crawl out of the computer and eat your face. Like, that's kind of a creepypasta.
Yeah, man, I remember getting those emails on my columbus.rr.com email address.
There you go.
Back when Spectrum was called Roadrunner.
Mm-hmm. Some of the other ones that were popular were Jeff the Killer, if you were
Jeff the Killer.
Edgy emo kid in 2006 or whatever.
That one also had like a different element to it because Jeff the Killer also came with an image macro. So like the image would get posted and then someone would tell the story of Jeff the Killer.
Yeah, and like Smile Dog was the same way, all that kind of stuff. Ben Drowned, that was like a video game creepypasta.
Yes.
We'll get back to that. Zalgo, if you've ever seen the text where somebody writes it and then it like gets all weird and distorted and it seems like an eldritch god is speaking through like text, that's Zalgo text.
Oh.
That comes from the Zalgo creepypasta.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
There was also one called Candle Cove.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up.
Candle Cove is a creepypasta referencing a children's TV show from the 80s that didn't exist. Basically, like, children were just looking at a spooky, a screen of static.
Yeah, like the person is talking about Candle Cove online and brings it up with their mom, and their mom was like, there's no show called Candle Cove. You would just like sit in front of the TV and stare at the static for 30 minutes.
Spooky.
Ooh, so spooky.
Remember Candle Cove because it's important later.
Yeah, because that evolved into a bigger thing, right?
Yes. But it's interesting.
Sure.
The first thing that is typically credited as analog horror is a video from 2009 called No Through Road. Basically, these 4 British teenagers are driving through the like rural English countryside and they get lost and some weird stuff starts to happen.
Ooh.
And it originally started as just a one video, like 10-minute video. It was very spooky. And then later on, 3 more were made to kind of add on to it. But that happened kind of after the genre started to like explode. But this is literally like January 2009. This is really, really early. And we are going to watch No Through Road because this is like the beginning of this genre. And we're back.
That was really good.
Yeah, right? Considering that these are just like 17-year-old British kids.
Yes.
Making a 9-minute long just like film on their fucking digital camera at home.
The editing and the practical effects are like both very good.
Yeah. I'm always impressed by that video. I watched that when I was in high school.
Yeah.
You know, I was like probably a junior in high school. And, you know, like Blair Witch and like all that stuff, like people thought this was real.
I bet, yeah.
People legitimately were like, this is real. What the fuck, you know? And I think it's great. It was made by a guy named Stephen Chamberlain with his friends. They were all like 17. They made it and just like released it to YouTube, which like, you know, there were some like creepy videos on YouTube at that point, but like an acted like short film.
Yeah.
Like people weren't doing that back then. And you know, it really was like unfiction because the framing at the beginning and at the end is these kids went missing. If you have any information, please let us know.
Yeah. Here's a website.
But like, it's amazing how much of like that era of internet horror, found footage, ARG, whatever stuff, all the cuts to like unrelated footage, you know, all of the visual tearing and effects and things like that.
Yeah.
That's straight out of the playbook, and they invented it.
Yeah. In the middle of all of the horrible stuff that's happening, there's like cut back to happier times when they were all hanging out together and laughing.
Yes. Classic. Really just good stuff. This was, like I said, early 2009. And 2009 would kind of end up being like the year that a lot of this stuff started to explode.
Yeah.
Later in 2009, on the Something Awful forums, this would be in June of 2009, there was a thread for, hey guys, let's invent a new monster. Let's just come up with some cool new monsters and some like make some visual like photo edits to kind of make this monster seem real. And a guy who went by Victor Surge, his real name is Eric Knudsen, not the actor, a different guy. Typically people just called him by his name Victor Surge on there. He created this character who was this tall, faceless man in a suit in the background of like parks and forests and playgrounds and things like that. And he was called the Slender Man. Mm-hmm. He invented this on June 10th, 2009. And it's amazing because that the forum page, like the you can see that thread. It's still up. You can go on there and look at it.
This is something that's kind of wonderful about Something Awful is that it is a forum that has been around since the early 2000s, and it is still there, and you can look through the archives and find old posts like this. There are a lot of old forums that simply don't exist anymore.
It's a real bummer.
Yeah, the information, the origins of a lot of that kind of stuff has been lost to digital decay, or even just like, you know, someone deleting the whole thing. We are, well, from where we're recording it now, we're going to be talking about John Dies at the End. And it started its life as a series of blog posts, essentially, that then later got turned into a book.
Yeah.
And when that happened, the old blog posts all got deleted. And those forums went, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, the forums went from being like their own thing to being the cracked.com forums.
Yeah. June 10th, it is, the original post is made. And pretty early on, people are like, oh, that's kind of neat.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. And then a couple days go by. And, you know, there's a couple people saying like, hey, good job, Victor. Those look great.
Very spooky. Nice concept. Cool guy.
Yeah. But then like after 3 or 4 days, people are like, holy shit, that Slenderman guy is giving me nightmares. Like, I'm freaking out. And it starts to just like virally catch on. And in a way that it was like there were not any big social media influencers or anything like that at the time. This was a very organic, like people just thought this was cool and they were posting it around the internet. And very early on, one of the other forum members says something to the effect of like, I wonder if in the future people are going to think that Slender Man is real and they're going to have to come back here to see that it's fake. And literally, I swear to God, a few posts later, someone's like, is this Slender Man like thing real? Like, where did this come from? Like, it's amazing how quickly like the internet
accepted it into a belief system.
Yes.
And like solidified and codified the belief. Like they are we are witnessing people creating folklore in real time.
Yeah.
And like we basically have essentially sort of like the first modern cryptid, more or less.
Yeah, we have the receipts. You
Yeah,
can see it happen. It's amazing. And what's fantastic about it too is that like nobody says, hey guys, let's pretend Slender Man's real. But everybody sort of immediately goes, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we posted this elsewhere and didn't say that we just invented it? We said this was like an old urban legend or an old monster or something like that. And it catches on so quickly that on June 18th, 8 days after it was invented, there is a post by a guy saying, hey, I've been working with this other guy and we've got these videos and there's weird stuff on them. Here, I'll post them. And 3 days later, he posts the first episode of Marble Hornets.
Ooh.
Dear listeners, I don't know if I can describe to you how wild, like, Marble Hornets would go on to be, like, there would be a major film starring Doug Jones as the Slender Man based on this series. Like, all of these people would go on to have careers in film. This was an internet sensation. And they said, this Slender Man guy sounds cool. Let's make a show about him within 2 weeks of it being invented.
Yeah. People talk now about like, oh, this went massively viral. And like the thing that they're talking about is they just means that a bunch of people put eyes on it.
Yeah.
But like Slenderman went viral in a way that it got into people's brains.
Yeah.
And like it sat there and they thought about it. And then they also went, ooh, this is cool. I want to add to this situation.
I didn't catch Marble Hornets immediately. I kind of was like, I got into it like the summer after that. Because like this is June of 2009. I got into it like the summer of 2010, like the between my junior and senior year of high school.
Sure.
But like I was there pretty early.
I don't remember when, but I do remember watching some Marble Hornets. My little sister was really into it, and so she was having me watch it. I remember, like, fully, she was like, have you heard about the Marble Hornets? And I'm like, what are Marble Hornets? For Pete's sake. And then, like, we watched a bunch of them, like, sitting in my bed, and watching, like, around my laptop.
So, I want to watch just a couple of episodes of Marble Hornets.
Sure.
Because I want to talk about it. I want to, this was a very important early thing for me as like a 17-year-old. And the Slendyverse, it's very important to analog horror because it does influence a lot of what comes later.
I have a question. Do you know if the black tentacles were an original part of Slenderman, or is that something that got added later?
So it's funny because literally from the very first page, one of the photo manipulations has like the black tentacles.
Okay.
They sort of change how they work a couple of times, and there are some where people are like, oh, I don't like the tentacles. I wish it was just a guy, and they sort of have an argument about it. But like within the first week or so, like people were already posting pictures of him like in the forest with big tentacles, like walking around like a daddy long legs or something, and he's just like a guy hanging in the middle of it. Like they got him so early. They figured that shit out. It's crazy.
I have another question, and you can totally cut this because I don't know if this is something that we really want to talk about. But, like, okay. So you know how there are those girls that committed murder because of the Slenderman thing?
Yeah.
They had that whole thing about, like, if you kill someone, Slenderman takes you away to his house in the forest. Was, like, that part of the original Something Awful for him? Or is that something that happened later with internet culture?
So this is kind of an interesting thing about Marble Hornets, and in fact, I'm glad we're talking about this because this is important. It was literally just, like, an idea that the guy came up with, and immediately it started to get iterated on.
Yeah. And
Marble Hornets is arguably like the definitive Slenderman mythos, and it was invented 11 days after the character was by two or three completely different guys than the guy who originally made it.
Yeah.
So to like say like what's original to the character is like really hard because immediately it was public domain. Like immediately everybody was inventing their own thing.
Yeah.
The whole idea about proxies where like Slenderman can like infect your mind and make you do stuff, Marble Hornets kind of invents that.
Okay.
But the original post was basically like children would go missing. That's like kind of as deep as it got. Children would go missing and there'd be pictures and there'd be this big scary tall guy in the background. And that was about as far as it went. And then people just iterated. Early on, like fires in schools and things like that also kind of were added to it. So there you go. We're going to watch this. And, hopefully we won't get eaten by the Slenderman.
Oh, no.
It's been probably a good decade since I actually watched Marble Hornets,
Yeah.
you know, and not like watched like a recap or something. And, you know, there's some stuff that still really holds up.
It's been well over a decade for me, and I only ever saw a couple of videos because, again,
Yeah.
like my little sister was like, "You have to see this; it's so scary." I don't know. We only watched the first season,
Sure.
So like the first 26 episodes,
And honestly, dear listeners, you can stop there. Like, the rest of it's fine, but like, the juice is the early stuff, I think.
yeah. I really appreciated a lot of the storytelling and a lot of the craft that was going into it. It did kind of lose me for a little bit there. We were making jokes towards the end about like, so I went back to the house.
Yeah, it was just the house that I almost died in twice. I'm gonna go back there.
Yeah. I will say though that like, you know, there is something there that I like and is spooky to me, and that is probably why I was making jokes about it. But like the fear of the inevitable.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I was saying, well, I simply would not watch the cursed tapes, but also. You have to.
You have to watch,
Yeah.
or else there's no story.
Yeah. He has to turn around and look behind him to make sure that she's still following him, and you simply must, because that's just how the story goes.
Yeah.
And sort of like the idea of like, you know that you shouldn't go back to the cursed house.
Yeah.
But you have to anyway.
Yeah.
Every single step you're walking, you're like, this is a bad idea. I shouldn't be doing this. Something bad is going to happen. And you just keep stepping forward and going to the cursed house.
Sure.
I fucking love that shit.
Yeah.
It scares the hell out of me.
I get it, dude. Absolutely.
I will say, as a quick little personal anecdote, I have resisted that urge. There was one time when I was really sick and I had a really bad fever, and also my jaw hurt super bad. I was sleeping and I was really hot, and it was like the middle of the afternoon, and for some reason I got this idea in my head that there was someone standing right behind me. Like, I was sleeping facing the wall and they were standing like by my bed behind me, and like I was like half asleep.
It was the Slender Man.
Yeah, it was the Slender Man. I was half asleep and I just had this idea that there was someone in my room staring at me, and if I rolled over and checked, he would kill me.
Yeah.
And I didn't roll over and check. I stayed where I was because I didn't want to die.
Hey, good for you, Hannah.
Yeah.
Like I said, you know, if someone handed you cursed tapes, you would just burn them.
Yeah, if someone's like, hey, my life is falling apart, please burn these tapes for me, I'm like, cool.
Yeah.
And then I would call you because you know more about fire safety than I do. and you would be like, well, we have to watch the cursed tapes, and I'd be like, absolutely no the fuck we don't, build a goddamn fire.
That would be our first like real fight. And we would just be like, no, we have to watch the cursed tapes. Yeah. So I want to talk about some of the successes that they really have. Like one of the things that I thought was really interesting, I watched a making of at some point where Troy and Joe, I think, are the two main guys. They play Jay and Alex in the thing. They sort of talked about how they basically wrote a 26 episode, like they put on flashcards like 26 ideas for episodes.
Yeah.
And they laid them out, and a couple of them they were like, well, this needs to chronologically happen here and this needs to chronologically happen here. But for the most part, they kind of like just jumbled them around. And, you know, that kind of gave the feeling of like, oh, he's literally just digging through a bag of tapes.
Yeah.
And what happens is just what kind of comes out.
So it starts with just a guy, Jay, saying like, hey, my friend gave me these tapes and told me to burn them, but I looked at them anyway.
Because they had worked on like a student film together,
Yes.
and he was kind of like, hey, we did a lot of work on this. Why do you want to burn all these tapes?
Why do you want to burn all these tapes? Yeah. So it's Alex, and then Jay is the one who's like uploading the videos.
Yeah.
And so Alex had been like directing the student film that was called Marble Hornets.
Yes.
And it's about like a guy going back to his hometown and like coming of age.
Classic
nonsense.
bullshit coming of age story.
Yeah. Regular.
And I'm sure they did that on purpose. I'm
Yeah.
sure they knew that.
Regular student film bullshit.
Yeah.
But like Alex starts to like kind of go crazy, and he's just constantly filming.
Yeah.
And then there's, you know, spooky stuff happening in the background. There's like a guy there, and like, you know, there's all of this stuff. And so Jay is going like digging through these tapes. He's just been handed a whole bunch of tapes, and like there's apparently no labeling on them. Like there's no filing system or anything like that. So he's just watching the tapes, and he then starts to go crazy in the same way that Alex did.
Yeah, and like he starts to have memory lapses. Things start to happen to him where like stuff happens and he's like, I don't remember this happening.
Yeah.
He goes places without knowing that he goes there. You know, towards the end of the series or the season, there gets to be points where, like, he walks through a door on the camera and he doesn't come out the other side of that door.
Not only that, but the door doesn't even move on the other side.
Yeah.
Like, you see him open the door in the room, and then in the other room, the door does not move.
I want to point out that No Through Road, a big influence, like, very early on, No Through Road was doing that thing where, like, you're in sort of this pocket dimension where space doesn't work and you loop around and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And Marble Hornets played with that, and lots of other series played with that.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of an achievable effect. I don't want to say easy, but it's an achievable effect for, like, amateur makers.
Yes.
And I think I mentioned this to you while we were watching it, but, like, one of the things that I think is a problem with a lot of these kinds of amateur films is that your acting is really bad, and in No Through Road, like, it's just four guys hanging out in a car, so, like, you can kind of just, like, oh, they're just goofing off.
Yeah, like, I don't think they wrote a script or anything like that. They're just kind of, like, hanging out.
And in Marble Hornets, the sort of frame is that, they're a bunch of film students making a student film, and so the bad acting is kind of, like, part of it.
Yeah.
It's sort of like this protective layer of, like, well, yeah, of course they're not that great of, like, actors and they're not that comfortable on camera because they're film students and they're just not that comfortable on camera.
Yeah.
The one who is the most comfortable is probably Alex, which is why he's kind of the main focus. Like, you see a lot of him in the videos.
Yes. And he's kind of got, like, the most, like, complicated emotions to try and convey on camera.
Yeah. And, like, I don't think that the pacing and the acting is, like, amazing, but if it's being presented as unfiction, which it is, I think it does a pretty good job of, obviously it's a supernatural demon monster thing that's, like, messing with your brain, but it comes across as, like, oh, this could be, like, a happening, sort of,
Yeah.
And I think it works.
They rely heavily on, and to their benefit, of, like, stuff happening that you don't quite see, and then your brain sort of, like, fills in the gaps.
Yes.
Which is something that a lot of these sort of, like, digital horror and analog horror kind of stuff do, of, like, a lot of the way that that Slender Man is coming up on you is that, like, video and audio start to distort. And then because it's distorted, the viewer can then fill in those gaps with whatever scary shit their brain thinks is going to be going on right there.
It is sort of like a priming thing where you're watching and there's, like, a visual tear.
Yeah.
Or an audio distortion. And immediately the immersion sort of breaks a little bit, where in the moment you're watching the scene, you're like, oh, I'm just following what these guys are doing. And then there's a distortion or a video effect. And suddenly you're like, oh, I am watching a video. And also it's sort of priming you, like, the world is going to break. Something is going to happen that is outside of the norm here. And it's deployed really well, and I'm not saying, like, don't watch the rest of Marble Hornets, but, like, season 1 to me is, like, when people talk about Marble Hornets, they're talking about season 1. Season 2 and season 3, it gets complicated. There's, like, other stuff going on. I think after a while they get a little too comfortable with just having Slender Man on screen and he's just, like, a big mannequin on stilts or whatever. I think early on they do more the Jaws thing where you can barely see him, and
Yeah, I was gonna say kind of one of the least scary things that happened is, like, that shot where you're, like, it's pointed up at the corner of the door and it is, like, a Dutch angle. Slender Man, like, the shadow comes through, but then it is just his arm pushing the door open. He just walks into the door, and that's kind of the most, like, okay, it's a little bit.
It's
goofy.
just a guy opening the door.
It's just a guy opening the door. That's a human. That's how human moves. That's not a spooky, scary monster.
Exactly. Yeah, and some of it works better than others. One of the things they do early on is they move the mannequin across, like, a high window, and he's sort of tilted in a weird way.
Yeah.
And so, like, the first time you see it, and maybe, like, the first 10 times you see it, you're really like, oh, he's, like, searching and moving in a really inhuman, smooth way.
Yeah.
But when you, like, really look at it close, you're like, oh, no, there's just a guy back there who's just moving a mannequin. But it's filmed in such a way that it doesn't come across. And analog horror, it's all on VHS tape. All of it's on, like, camcorder tape. And obviously they're probably doing some digital editing or whatever, but, like, that is crucial to the sort of the story itself, is that everything is on these analog recorded tapes.
Yeah.
And I think that, this was obviously just a huge influence on later analog horror and later just, like, amateur horror, found footage, like, everything. Marble Hornets was hugely important. Everyone who you see now, when you ask them, like, what was something that you watched that made you want to do this, like they will tell you Marble Hornets. 100%. This was the most popular Slenderverse series. There were a few others. There's one called Tribe 12. I won't really get into it, but it was pretty popular. It's probably like the second most popular one. But the third most popular one was Everyman Hybrid, and I actually really liked Everyman Hybrid. We're not going to watch it, but I'll just kind of briefly describe it. One of the things that they deployed, and I think that this sort of became a very common thing for these like internet ARG, amateur internet horror things, is that Marble Hornets, it's like, oh, I'm just going to look at these tapes because of this student film. Oh, it turns out there's Slender Man. And like Tribe 12, it's like, oh, I'm just going to make this YouTube channel for this project for school. Oh, it turns out there's Slender Man. Everyman Hybrid did this thing where they started a fitness channel. That was why it was called Everyman Hybrid. The idea was that, you could do every person, you could just do it yourself.
You don't necessarily have to dedicate your life to
Yeah,
gym.
you don't have to be like a ripped dude. You don't have to like buy tons of expensive equipment. And so like the videos were all like, here's a inexpensive exercise that you can do. Here's like ways to buy cheap, healthy snacks at the supermarket, things like that.
Yeah.
And that's what like the first like 5 or 6 videos of the channel are. And in the background, there's Slender Man. And you're all like, oh, look. Oh, it's Slender Man.
Oh, no, it's Slender Man.
Oh, we get it. Ah, ha, ha, ha. And then episode 7, the guy who's wearing the Slender Man suit is hanging out with them. And then they see Slender Man in their house. And they're like, hey, wait a minute. What? And it turns out that sometimes Slender Man in the background is just them playing a prank, but sometimes it's actually Slender Man. And that's a great start to the thing. I would argue that Everyman Hybrid, I don't think it nails it a lot. I think all of the problems that Marble Hornets has, and maybe even worse. But it was sort of more ambitious.
Yeah.
Like, it was really trying to... It married a lot of the ARG stuff. It married a lot of different mediums, like... there's a character in Everyman Hybrid who had a Tumblr blog for like maybe not 2 years, but for like a long period of time before they ever actually crossed into the story.
Yeah.
They were really setting up the groundwork, and like she talked about a bunch about how she had a horrible tragedy in her past. And like, it turned out later on that was the same tragedy in her past that the guys from the Everyman Hybrid channel also had.
Yep.
And so, they kind of eventually sort of came together. They did some interesting things where, like, they were uploading videos, but then also there were videos being uploaded to their channel that were, like, ones that they couldn't have recorded. And it, like, they couldn't see those videos. Like, they would look on...
So they'd be like, what are you talking about? This video's on our channel. We didn't do that. It's not there.
They were super influenced by House of Leaves. They talked about it a lot. There were...
Oh, yeah.
Some of their houses, like, they had this thing where, like, one of the characters' like closet was connected to another character's like kitchen so they could go through it and stuff like that. There's a lot of alternate universe and like the same people but in like a slightly different version doing different things. I really liked Everyman Hybrid, and I would recommend, if you like Marble Hornets, to maybe also watch that. Again, it kind of goes off the rails at a certain point.
That is kind of a problem with a lot of long form horror stuff.
Yeah.
Is that a lot of the times people just like, well, we need to keep upping the ante or like developing new lore, and so then it gets like long and complicated and contradictory.
Yeah, I think one of the things that happens a lot with all analog horror to this day is that you start with this like really interesting, neat idea and a very interesting way to present the narrative, and then at a certain point, it just becomes your 3 guys standing in front of a camera doing plot.
Yeah.
And the interesting, cool stuff that you were doing was great, but I don't care about just 3 guys standing in front of a camera talking about the thing that's happening. Like,
yeah.
You're not shooting it very interestingly. You're not acting it very well. Like, that's just kind of a problem. And basically everybody who talks about analog horror series says, like, the minute you start to have like live actors in front of like a camera, it starts to be a little, I don't know, But that's kind of all of the Slender Man series that I'm going to really talk about. But like right around this time, this was when I was hugely obsessed with internet horror. And also right around this time, the video game Slender, which was later called Slender the 8 Pages, was made by Blue Isle Studios, and that exploded Slender Man's popularity even more, especially among kids.
Yes.
Before that video game, Slender Man was mostly a, like, late teens, early 20-somethings, like, internet forum dweller, like me. And then when the video game came out and Let's Players, like, Markiplier or PewDiePie or whatever the fuck, started playing the video game, then kids really got into Slender Man, and that's sort of how you got the stabbings and the, all that kind of stuff.
All of the extra lore that then got added.
This stuff was not made for kids, but then kids started to really get into it. A year after Slender the 8 Pages came out, the Marble Hornets guys and Victor Surge, who invented Slender Man, and Blue Isle Studios all kind of worked together to make Slender the Arrival. And that was like a very popular video game. It was basically the Slender the 8 Pages, but like bigger and more of a story. And, critically it wasn't that great, but like it was very popular at the time. And
if you're playing it, it's because you like Slender Man stuff. Like you're not here to play like some super deep and intricate video game. You're here because Slender Man.
Video games like that at this time, especially like indie horror video games, became really a big part of this like budding genre. Some of them used kind of the same tactics. They were using this like purposefully retro lo-fi look. The game that I remember really well was from 2012. It's called I'm Scared. And it was like a pixelated old computer games look, which lots of games do now, but at the time was kind of new. And one of the things that it did was like it would crash your desktop. It would like put text files in your computer. Ooh. It would like reach through the fourth wall a little bit. And so it really fit into this like, retro analog unfiction vibe. And lots of other games would kind of do that at the time.
The game is haunted.
Yes. Which, of course, brings me to 2014's Five Nights at Freddy's. I'm not going to talk too much about Five Nights at Freddy's. Most of you either already know about it, or if you don't, like, you can find way better people to describe it than me. But Five Nights at Freddy's, especially in its initial version, was like an old 80s Chuck E. Cheese pizzeria, and old animatronics, old video screens, and
old CCTVs,
like CRT TVs. Like it had a very deliberately retro tech look. And there have even been Five Nights at Freddy's analog horror series. Like there was the VHS series and there was the Walton Files. I won't really talk about them, but like it fit the aesthetic really well. And this really started to snowball a little bit. Like, people really started to get into it because Five Nights at Freddy's became a huge smash hit success.
Massively popular.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't really play video games, and I definitely don't play horror video games, but I know about Five Nights at Freddy's.
In 2013, there was kind of the first big analog horror, whatever kind of series that was not made by an English-speaking creator. It was made by a Polish artist. His name was eventually revealed to be Victor Grzybow, although he, at the time, kind of like kept it hidden because he didn't want people to know.
Sure.
It was kind of like an unfiction, like spooky, like nobody knows what the creators are, nobody knows who's even appearing in the show. It was called Kraina Grzybow. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm sure I'm not. And that means Mushroom Land. And it's sort of like the name of a fictional TV channel.
Ooh.
Yes. And the main feature of which is a series called Smile Guide. I'm not even going to try and pronounce the Polish for it. This sort of like fictional TV channel being sort of the place where the creepy stuff is coming from, that is a continuing theme in analog horror going forward.
Yeah.
For a lot of very obvious reasons that we'll get to. And it has an 80s, 90s, like, kid show aesthetic, although it's like an Eastern European, maybe even like Soviet, like, kid show aesthetic.
Yeah.
Which kind of increases the, like, uncanniness, especially for,
Yeah, Americans.
Yeah, like a Western audience who didn't live through that.
It's already othered, and then there's that, like, extra level of othering, as in, like, it's literally from a different country.
Mm-hmm, yeah. And, I don't want to hype this up too much, but, like, this, to me, really feels like a higher level thing. Like, they're going for, like, instead of just, like, internet horror to scare your friends and, like, go viral, this is, like, trying to make a work of art. Like, really something special.
Yeah.
Content warning. There are some pretty implicit themes, not explicit, but implicit themes of, like, sexual assault and kidnapping, things like that. But and obviously very disturbing images. That's part of the whole presentation.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing.
Yeah, but we are going to watch this. It's only 7 episodes. There's other stuff, but the main thing, Smile Guide, is only about 7 episodes, and I think it's worth watching.
Cool.
All right, so we'll be right back.
Toodle.
What'd you think?
Woof.
Yeah.
That one's sad.
It is very sad, but I think it's really good.
Yeah, there's clearly a lot of care and a lot of thought being put into it,
Yeah.
and the way that the creator implies things without outright stating them,
Yes.
very well thought out.
Uh-huh.
Spooky and sad and creepy.
Yeah, but also kind of funny.
Yeah. There were a couple of funny moments. They're like, just some little weird distortions played for comedic effect as opposed to like the spook factor.
Yeah. It's weird because I think sometimes this gets forgotten. I think sometimes people think of like analog horror as being like a later 2010s thing, and if you say, well, what happened before that, people will go like, oh, well, there was like Marble Hornets and stuff like that, and it's like, this was kind of important. This came out in 2013 and it ran until I think 2017, so it kind of existed like right in that sort of middle of the 2010s, and it's not that many episodes, and they sort of were spaced out. But I remember like this coming out and watching stuff about it like in 2014. Like I remember that time period.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's a lot of room for interpretation there.
Lots of room for
So
interpretation.
I can definitely see like a lot of people on various forums and boards and stuff like being like, what do you think this means? Well, here's what I think that it is. And
yeah.
I mean, it's not a story with a beginning, middle, and end. It's a little bit more. It's like a serial kind of thing where there's emotion and there are connections to be made, but it's simply being presented to you. It's not asking anything of you.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting. Victor Strebog has gone on to do a few other kind of fun things. Mm-hmm. There's one that's the COTN incident, and then there's Indistinct Chatter. I don't know if I would necessarily call those horror, but they are sort of still in the genre of like weird analog like media, sort of nonsensical, surrealistic, heartfelt. Definitely seems like a creator who has some like really interesting ideas.
Yeah. Can I just also say really quickly, I really liked with this one how, like, a lot, the other ones that we have watched so far, was it No Through Road and Marble Hornets, they were obviously working with what they had in like, color palette and that kind of thing, and a lot of it kind of what ends up looking, like, washed out and blurry, and, like, that's sort of, like, the staple of the genre.
Yes.
Which, good, fine, there's a lot of horror to be had in, like, the things that you can't see, but I really like how this one, like, it had the 70s television oversaturation kind of thing going on. And there is still that, like, the horror of the things that you can't see because all of the colors are actually, they're so bright, they're blown out.
Yes. I agree completely. You know, they really effectively used the analog medium to get across what they were trying to get across. And, you know, I'm not saying that narrative isn't important to analog horror. It is. But I do think that it takes a backseat to the presentation. I think the presentation, visuals, and, you know, in general, like, you know, there needs to be some kind of plot. But I think the genre really starts to go in this direction where it's much more on the audience to sort of figure it out than it is to, like, be given sort of like an A, B, and C kind of thing.
You're not being spoon-fed with it. It's simply, again, it's being presented to you, and you are supposed to look at it and like draw connections between things and figure out for yourself what is happening here and what you should be scared of.
Yeah, and I think that's the sort of ARG lineage of this genre, is that it's, you know, even later, like a lot of later series have an ARG involved. We'll talk about them. But, like, not all of them do. But even the ones that don't, they are asking you to sort of, like, draw conclusions and solve mysteries and figure things out with the clues that you're given.
To engage.
Yeah, exactly.
Not merely to consume, but to engage.
Yeah, and, you know, one of the big detractions, like people criticize the genre for, is stuff like that. They're just like, well, they just can't tell a story, so they just put scary, weird images up on the screen and tell you to figure it out. And I think that's underselling it a bit, but I can understand why they might feel that way.
Yeah, I think this is one of those things where it's like different strokes for different folks. Like,
Yeah.
if you just want to watch a horror movie and be scared, that's fine. If you want to watch something, come to your own conclusions, and maybe like dig a little bit deeper and go on like a little internet rabbit hunt, then like that's also fine.
Yeah, I agree completely. We'll move on from this for now. And I just kind of want to set up what I'm calling sort of like the next era of analog horror. So to me, everything we've talked about in this episode so far, everything from like No Through Road and Creepypasta up through, right around here, I'm calling this sort of like the first era of analog horror.
Sure.
In fact, you could even say that it's pre-analog horror because that term doesn't exist yet. Another thing that I think is important in this era that's not exactly related, but I do think is influential to it, is, surprisingly enough, Adult Swim.
Yeah.
As early as 2005, Adult Swim started doing, like, creepy bumpers.
Yeah, I remember watching those.
Yeah.
Where, before and after the commercial break, they would just, like, cut to a screen and, like, the saturation might be turned up really high, or, like, something might be doubled, and then there would be, like, a weird little phrase.
Yep. The famous one, or infamous one, was Dawn is Your Enemy. Which, they would play at the very end of the night before it went to Cartoon Network in the morning. That one, a lot of people said what creeped them out as a kid or scared them when they woke up and saw it.
Yeah, I bet.
And that ran until about 2010. And then right around 2010, they actually got even creepier. The end of 2010, they started showing the show off the air. And so they did a lot of like really creepy surrealist bumpers like in between those shows.
Yeah, I am unfamiliar with this because I did not have access to cable at that point. So.
Yeah, there were quite a few. I'm not going to go into them because there's just so many of them. But, off the air, they would actually like air segments from the show. And if you've ever seen Off the Air, it's surreal like animations and recordings and like a lot of video with visual distortion effects and things like that. They all had sort of a theme, and they ran that for several years, but I really do think that Off the Air was both influenced by this era and would be influential to the later stuff.
Yeah, sure, I can see that. Like, if you're the sort of person who is watching a lot of Adult Swim and then ends up watching like a bunch of other internet ARG, this kind of analog horror stuff, like I can see you pulling from both of those places if you eventually wanted to make your own series.
And I think a lot of the same people who were watching those internet ARGs and horror shows and stuff like that were also people who watched Adult Swim.
Yeah.
It was the same kind of demographic. Alan Resnick is the guy I want to talk about, too. Alan Resnick made some of those shorts for Adult Swim. He also did unedited footage of a bear in 2014, which, again, I don't know how much you can call it analog horror per se, but, like, some of the staples of the genre are there. The sort of, like, visual effects, the television presentation, it being like a commercial that goes in weird directions.
Yeah, it being like a nature documentary and then a commercial, and then the commercial goes off the rails.
And the reality sort of bleeds into the other parts. That's absolutely a big part of this genre, and again, I think it was very influential. And then 2 years later, he did This House Has People in It.
Yes.
And This House Has People in It is, a lot of people just think that is analog horror, and it's definitely an ARG.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've seen This House Has People in It, and I watched a video where someone talked about the whole ARG aspect of it.
Yeah.
Because I had seen This House Has People in It, I was like, oh, this is weird and spooky, I like it. And then someone was like, deconstructing This House Has People in It, and it's like a 4-hour long video, and I'm like, it's a 2-minute long clip, like what are we doing here? And then, like, no, there's so much extra stuff, and there is, like, the whole ARG aspect to it.
There's literally a video game that you can play from it. Like, you could, from the information you get in there, you can go on a website and play a video game. That's sort of like a Sonic the Hedgehog parody, because there's a Sonic the Hedgehog parody character in This House Has People in It.
Yeah.
really sort of hugely influential. And I really feel like at this point, the people doing this stuff were no longer just like 17-year-old like teenagers who were just kind of like making something cool on their home camcorders. It seemed like creators who had like really good ideas and maybe more resources. I don't want to necessarily say they were using a lot of money, but like,
access to better cameras and equipment, and maybe they might have gotten a computer that had better editing software.
Yeah, and they're animators, or they, had like real actors, things like that. And so it's kind of pushing the boundaries, and it's kind of making its first steps into arguably the mainstream here. But this genre, as I've said before, didn't really have a name yet. It didn't really have like a cohesive kind of idea. In 2015, that would change. A new internet series would give it its name, literally defining the genre. So next time, we're going to watch analog horror at 476 megahertz. Local 58.
Hey.
So that's all for this time. I'm Donovan.
I'm Hannah.
And this has been my thing. We'll see you next time.
Toodaloo.
Ooh.